developing world continue to host and receive large numbers of refugees despite their own limited means. People are on the move as never before. In the Americas, in the Sahel, in the Mediterranean, and Andaman Seas. These flows raise complex issues and rouse strong passions. Certain touchstones must guide our response: international law, human rights, and basic compassion. All countries need to more to shoulder their responsibilities. I commend those in Europe that are upholding the Union's values and providing asylum. At the same time, I urge Europe to do more. After the Second World War, it was Europeans seeking the world's assistance. I will convene a high-level meeting on September 30th, day after tomorrow, aimed at promoting a comprehensive approach to the refugee and migration crisis. We must crack down on traffickers and address the pressing pressures being faced by countries of destination. We must combat discrimination. In the 21st century, we should not be building fences or walls. But above all, we must look at root causes in countries of origins. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Syrians are leaving their country and their homes because of oppression, extremism, and destruction and fear. 4 years of diplomatic paralysis by the Security Council and others have allowed the crisis to spin out of control. The responsibility for ending this conflict lies first and foremost with Syrian warring parties. They are the ones turning their country to ruins. But it's not enough to look only within Syria for solution. The battle is also being driven by regional powers and rivalries. Weapons and money flowing into country are fueling the fire. My special envoy is doing everything he can to forge the basis for a peaceful settlement. It is time now for others, primarily the Security Council and key regional actors, to step forward. Five countries in particular hold the key: the Russian Federation, the United States, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Turkey. But as long as one side will not compromise with the other, it is futile to expect change on the ground. Innocent Syrians pay the price of more barrel bombs and terrorism. There must be no impunity for atrocious crimes. Our commitment for justice should lead us to refer the situation to the International Criminal Court. In Yemen, 21 million people, 80% of the population, need humanitarian assistance. All sides are showing disregard for human life, but most of the casualties are being caused by airstrikes. I call for an end to the bombings, which are also destroying Yemeni cities, infrastructure, and heritage. Here too, the proxy battles of others are driving the fighting. I once again urge the parties to return to the table, negotiate in good faith, and resolve this crisis through dialogue facilitated by my special envoy. Let me be clear. There is no military solution to this conflict. We must also guard against the dangerous drift in the Middle East peace process. With the sentiment expanding and incitement and provocations on the rise, it is essential for Israelis and Palestinians to re-engage and for the international community to pressure the parties to do so. The world can no longer wait for leaders to finally choose a path to peace. Daesh, Boko Haram, and Al-Shabaab remain major threats, especially to the women and girls who have been systematically targeted. The world must unite against blatant brutality of these groups. We must also counter the exclusion and hopelessness on which extremists feed. Moreover, states must never violate human rights in the fight against terror. Such abuses only perpetuate the cycle. Early next year, I will present to the General Assembly a plan of action how to counter violent extremism and terrorism. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I commend the landmark nuclear agreement between the Islamic Republic of Iran and the P5+1 countries. Dialogue and patient diplomacy have paid dividends. I hope this spirit of solidarity among the permanent members of the Security Council can be demonstrated in other conflict areas such as Syria, Yemen, and Ukraine. Let us build on the recent agreements in South Sudan, finalize the agreements in Libya, and spare those countries further suffering. Now is the time for renewed dialogue to address continuing tension on the Korean Peninsula. I call on the parties to refrain from taking any action that may increase mistrust and urge them to instead promote reconciliation and efforts toward a peaceful, denuclearized peninsula. I'm ready to support inter-Korean cooperation. We also need to step up our work for the well-being of the people of Democratic People's Republic of Korea. I'm deeply troubled by growing restrictions on media freedoms and civil society across the world. It is not a crime for journalists, human rights defenders, and others to exercise their basic rights. We must preserve the space for civil society and the press to do their vital work without fear of attack and imprisonment. Democratic backsliding is a threat in too many places as leaders seek to stay in office beyond their mandated limits. We see rallies and petitions being engineered to look like the spontaneous will of the people. Those manufactured groundswells of support only lay the groundwork for instability. I urge leaders to abide by the constitutional limits on their terms. Mesdames et Messieurs, chefs d'État et gouvernement, Mesdames et Messieurs, prises ensemble, ces crises nous ont fait atteindre les limites des outils vitaux dont nous disposons pour la résolution des conflits et les réponses que nous donnons aux crises humanitaires. Un peu plus tôt ce mois-ci, j'ai exposé ma vision pour renforcer les opérations de paix des Nations Unies en m'appuyant sur les recommandations du groupe indépendant. Nos opérations de maintien de la paix et missions politiques ont besoin de capacités accrues et d'objectifs politiques clairs. Ce qu'il nous faut, c'est un engagement renouvelé en faveur de la prévention, de partenariats régionaux plus forts et un soutien plus déterminé à la consolidation de la paix. Il nous faut aussi mettre plus avant le potentiel des femmes dans la promotion de la paix, tel que l'envisage la résolution 1325 du Conseil de sécurité. J'espère que l'Assemblée générale réagira promptement, témoignant ainsi de son engagement fort dans ce sens. Les gens aujourd'hui, ainsi les générations qui leur succéderont, ont besoin que nous fassions tout ce qui est en notre possible pour saisir cette occasion et accomplir des progrès compréhensifs. Mr. President of the General Assembly, distinguished heads of state and government, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Founded in a fractured world, the United Nations brought hope that collective action could avoid another global catastrophe. Over the past 70 years, we have helped to liberate millions of people from colonialism and supported the successful struggle against apartheid. We have defeated deadly diseases, defended human rights, and deepened the rule of law. This and more we have done, but that is far from enough. We are living through a time of severe test, but also one of great opportunity. Today we are more connected than ever, better informed than ever, and have better tools than ever. The recipes for positive change are on the table. The ingredients for success are in our hands. We continue to reform the United Nations, although we know we must do much more, both managerially and politically. We can draw strength from the empowerment of women, but we still need to step it up for gender equality on the way to Planet 50 to 50. I'm inspired by the world's young people, who make up half the world's population, and whose voices we must integrate more fully in decision-making everywhere. And I'm impressed with the way we, all of us, can unite behind vital causes like the 2030 Development Agenda. 1 year ago, when we gathered for the general debate, the Ebola crisis in West Africa was claiming lives daily. Families were being devastated. Fear was rife. Forecasts suggested frightening losses in the month ahead. Today, thanks to collective action by communities and their governments and others all around the world, cases of Ebola have declined dramatically. The outbreak is not over, and we must remain vigilant. But the response is working, with the lessons pointing to a safer future for all. When we stand together, there is no limit to what we can achieve. 3 days ago, young people from many nations stood together in the balcony of this hall. They asked for one thing above all: change. Change. There is nothing we can say to the world's children that can convince them the world needs to be the way it is. That means we must do everything we can to close the gap between the world as it is and the world as it should be. That is the mission of the United Nations. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let's work together to make this better for all, where everybody can live with human dignity and prosperity. I thank you for your leadership. Thank you very much.
I thank the Secretary General of the United Nations for his presentation. The General Assembly will now turn to agenda item 8, the general debate, and I will now deliver, in capacity of President of the 70th session of the General Assembly, a statement. Heads of states, heads of government, distinguished ministers, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, friends. On Friday, you, heads of states and governments, approved the 2030 Agenda. A genuine transformative decision, epic in its analysis and revolutionary in its ambition. A decision that once again proved universal relevance and value of the United Nations. Now we face the even more daunting task of transforming our vision into action. Our ambition will only be realized in a world of peace and security and respect for human rights, not in a world where investment in armament and wars more and more absorb and destroy a huge share of the resources we have committed to invest in a sustainable development. Not in a world where war, poverty, hunger, deep inequalities and poor governance are drivers of ever-growing waves of refugees and uncontrolled human migration, and count heavily also among the causes of conflicts, which in turn affect and uproot many more people. Governments will also only succeed in implementing this great agenda with the continued and expanding participation of all stakeholders, parliamentarians, leaders of regions, cities, local communities, civil society, youth, religious communities, trade unions, business, and academia worldwide. And the great goals of the United Nations will only be fulfilled when we realize that global interdependency is more pronounced than ever before. So too is the urgency for joint global action. With the Millennium Development Goals, we have over the last 15 years cut the number of extremely poor people by half. With the Sustainable Development Goals, however, we acknowledge that eradicating poverty in all its forms is only possible with a much more complex transformation of the entire global economy, the environment, and the social structure. That we cannot rely only on the traditional growth model of the past 15 or the past 70 years. Incredible and unsustainable inequality in income, wealth, access to resources, and to quality education and health services must be overcome. We underline more vigorously than ever that equal rights and opportunities for girls and women are crucial preconditions for a sustainable future everywhere. We recognize that each and every person has a legitimate demand for a decent life, but that as the number of people on our planet has tripled since I was born nearly 70 years ago, we must meet the demand without further depleting the natural resources that we pass on to new generations. We acknowledge also that people in developed countries cannot continue to consume and produce in the manner they are used to, and that billions of hardworking people elsewhere in their road to prosperity should not simply adopt the same behavior as that of today's rich countries. To build a sustainable global infrastructure over the next 15 years, trillions of dollars need to be invested. The least developed countries can only do this when rich countries live up to their long-standing commitments of a minimum of 0.7% of their national income in development assistance. And national governments can only fund their share of the investment required by fighting corruption and building efficient state state tax systems. And a much stronger international cooperation must ensure that rich companies and rich individuals pay taxes where they earn their money and are no longer able to evade payment in tax havens. Finally, we must realize that a huge share of the investment in a better future must come from private sources such as companies, capital investors and pension funds. Therefore, it is crucial that governments create a framework for markets that makes the green investment the obvious, safer and better investment, not only for mankind, not only in the longer perspective, but for business here and now. Excellencies, it is due time for far-reaching decisions to bring an end to devastating conflicts and to start investing big in sustainable development. Action is needed now. If we fail, we run the overwhelming risk of unmanageable and inescapable damage to the political, social, ecological and climate balance of our planet. If we fail, the SDGs will never be reached because the resources needed will be swallowed up in addressing crises and conflicts. If we fail to stop climate change, the consequences will be catastrophic. Further, hundreds of millions of people will be forced away from their habitats. Historically, migration has brought huge benefits to the global community, but large scale of uncontrolled migration have the potential to destabilize societies, leading to conflicts far more damaging than those we are not able to deal with in an orderly and humanitarian fashion today. Excellencies, we live in paradoxical and transformational times. Never before has such a large share of humanity enjoyed so good a life, yet never before have we been at greater risk for fundamentally disrupting the basic living conditions of our small globe. And while a larger share of humanity lives in peace and has done so for longer periods than earlier in human history, the follies of war and self-destruction have increased in the Middle East, in parts of Africa, and once again in Europe, creating unfathomable humanitarian catastrophes and more refugees than at any time since the end of World War II. Tensions between major powers increase, as do investments in all kinds of armaments. Vast arsenals of nuclear, chemical and biological weapons still exist, and disarmament negotiations in Geneva have been stalled for years. 4 weeks ago, I visited Hiroshima and was once again confronted with the horrors of nuclear war. We must remember that at this very moment still, all too many nuclear warheads are on high alert, and we have not eliminated risks of nuclear conflicts by mistake. First of all, therefore, we need to rebuild confidence and scale back these risks. Excellencies, we must, here in the United Nations, here in this very hall, make an extraordinary effort to break all the vicious circles. We must act in accordance with the agreed understanding behind the 2030 Agenda by recognizing the strong linkages between development, peace and security, and respect for human rights, and take specific actions to make progress in each of these areas. This will be the central focus of the 70th session of the General Assembly and my presidency here. I will offer my strong support to new ideas how to strengthen the global peace and security, from the role of women to conflict prevention, mediation and settlement, from the UN's peace operations to the overall peace-building architecture and Security Council reform. It is my sincere hope that the UN will develop a more direct role in reconciliation and peace-building, including in conflicts where we have failed until now, and that we will move forward in our common efforts to prevent vicious radicalization and fight the evil of terrorism. With parties living up to their promises, the nuclear agreement between Iran and the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, Germany and the European Union, can be a very important contribution to avoiding nuclear proliferation. Impatiently, we await the day when major and regional powers also join forces to stop the senseless and horrifying bloodshed in and around Syria, and in doing so, address the root causes of the refugee crisis. I am sure we all wish that this day comes very soon and want to contribute to such an outcome the most we are able to. I am sure that member states, building on our great 2030 agenda, will increase efforts to make human rights a reality for all people without discrimination, from fundamental rights such as safe access to food, clean water, quality health and education services, and decent work, to civil and political rights such as freedom of expression and association, from the rights of migrants and indigenous peoples to those of women, children, and persons with disabilities. We must also advance efforts to strengthen good governance and the rule of law. As President of the General Assembly, I will support member states in their ambitions for revitalization and reform, including a new, more transparent process for selection of the next Secretary General. Excellencies, this 70th anniversary of the United Nations must be a defining year to confirm and invigorate the universal values that we, the peoples, agreed upon in the Charter. No one shall be left behind, because as the Norwegian author Nordahl Grieg wrote, "Noble is mankind, earth is rich. If there is need and hunger, it's by deceit." I thank you. Before giving the floor to the first speaker for this morning, I would like to remind members that the list of speakers for the general debate has been established on agreed basis, that statements should be no longer than 15 minutes, to enable all the speakers to be heard at a given meeting. Within this time frame, I would like to appeal to speakers to deliver their statements at a reasonable pace so that interpretation in the 6 official United Nations languages may be provided properly. I would also like to draw your attention to the decision taken by the General Assembly at previous sessions, namely that the practice of expressing congratulations inside the Assembly Hall after a speech has been delivered is strongly discouraged. In this connection, after delivering their statements, Speakers are invited to exit the General Assembly Hall through room GA200 located here behind the podium before returning to their seats. May I take it that the General Assembly agrees to proceed in the same manner during the general debate of the 70th session? It's so decided. Finally, I should like to draw the attention of members that during the general debate, official photographs of all the speakers are taken by the Department of Public Information. Members interested in obtaining these photographs are requested to contact the Photo Library of the United Nations. The Assembly will now hear an address by Her Excellency Dilma Rousseff, President of the Federal Republic of Brazil, and I request the protocol to escort Her Excellency. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome to the United Nations Her Excellency Dilma Rousseff, President of the Federative Republic of Brazil, and to invite her to address the Assembly.
Senhor Morgans Liketoff, Presidente da 70ª Assembleia Geral das Nações Unidas. Senhor Ban Ki-moon, Secretário-Geral das Nações Unidas. Senhores e senhoras chefes de Estado e de Governo e de delegações. Senhoras e senhores, é um privilégio poder dirigir-me à Assembleia Geral neste ano em que as Nações Unidas celebram seu 70º aniversário. Minhas primeiras palavras, senhor presidente, são de congratulações por sua escolha para presidir esta Assembleia Geral. Reitero em especial o apoio do Brasil à sua disposição de adotar medidas que fortalecem a agenda de desenvolvimento da organização. 70 anos são passados da Conferência de São Francisco. Buscou-se naquela ocasião construir um mundo fundado no direito internacional e na busca de soluções pacíficas para os conflitos. Desde então, tivemos avanços e recuos. O processo de descolonização apresentou notável evolução, como se pode constatar contemplando a composição desta Assembleia. A ONU ampliou suas iniciativas, incorporando a Agenda 2030 e os Objetivos do Desenvolvimento Sustentável, ou seja, as questões relativas ao meio ambiente, ao fim da pobreza, ao desenvolvimento social e econômico e ao acesso a serviços de qualidade. Temas como os desafios urbanos, a questão de gênero das mulheres e das meninas, as questões de raça ganharam prioridade. Não conseguiu o mesmo êxito ao tratar da segurança coletiva, questão que esteve na origem da organização e no centro de suas preocupações. Jornais, alguns com alto potencial destrutivo, assim como a expansão do terrorismo que mata homens, mulheres e crianças, que destrói patrimônio da humanidade, que expulsa de suas comunidades seculares milhões de pessoas, mostram que a ONU está diante de um grande desafio. Não se pode ter complacência com tais atos de barbárie, como aqueles perpetrados pelo chamado Estado Islâmico e por outros grupos associados. Esse quadro explica, em boa medida, a crise dos refugiados pela qual passa atualmente a humanidade. Grande parte dos homens, mulheres e crianças que se aventuram nas águas do Mediterrâneo e erram penosamente nas estradas da Europa provêm do Oriente Médio e Norte da África, onde estados nacionais desestruturados por ações militares ao arrepio do direito internacional, abrindo espaço para a proliferação do terrorismo. A profunda indignação provocada pela foto de um menino sírio morto nas praias da Turquia e pela notícia sobre as 71 pessoas asfixiadas em um caminhão na Áustria deve se transformar em ações inequívocas de solidariedade prática. Em um mundo onde circulam livremente mercadorias, capitais, informações e ideias, é absurdo impedir o livre trânsito de pessoas. O Brasil é um país de acolhimento, um país formado por refugiados. Recebemos sírios, haitianos, homens e mulheres de todo o mundo, assim como abrigamos há mais de um século milhões de europeus, árabes e asiáticos. Estamos abertos, de braços abertos, para receber refugiados. Somos um país multiétnico. Somos um país multiétnico que convive com as diferenças e sabe a importância delas para nos tornar mais fortes, mais ricos, mais diversos, tanto cultural quanto social e economicamente. Senhor Presidente, esse inquietante pano de fundo nos impõe uma reflexão sobre o futuro das Nações Unidas e nos exige agir concreta e rapidamente. Necessitamos uma ONU capaz de fomentar uma paz sustentável no plano internacional e de atuar com presteza e eficácia em situações de guerra, de crise regional, localizada e de quaisquer atos contra a humanidade. Não se pode postergar, por exemplo, a criação de um Estado palestino que conviva pacífica e harmonicamente com Israel. Da mesma forma, não é tolerável a expansão de assentamentos nos territórios ocupados. Para dar às Nações Unidas a centralidade que lhe corresponde, é fundamental uma reforma abrangente de suas estruturas. Seu Conselho de Segurança necessita ampliar seus membros permanentes e não permanentes para tornar-se mais representativo, mais legítimo e eficaz. A maioria dos Estados-membros não quer que uma decisão a esse respeito possa ser eternamente adiada. Temos a esperança de que a reunião que hoje se inicia entre para a história como o ponto de inflexão na trajetória das Nações Unidas, que traga resultados concretos no longo e até agora inconcluso processo de reforma da organização. Nossa região, onde imperam a paz e a democracia, se regozija com o estabelecimento de relações diplomáticas entre Cuba e os Estados Unidos, que põe fim a um contencioso derivado da Guerra Fria. Esperamos que esse processo venha completar-se com o fim do embargo que pesa sobre Cuba. Celebramos igualmente o recente acordo logrado com o Irã, que permitirá a esse país desenvolver a energia nuclear para fins pacíficos e devolver a esperança de paz para toda uma região. No âmbito dos BRICS, lançamos um novo Banco de Desenvolvimento, que ajudará na ampliação do comércio e dos investimentos e, possivelmente, na consecução dos objetivos do desenvolvimento sustentável. Senhor Presidente, a Agenda 2030 desenha o futuro que queremos. Os 17 Objetivos do Desenvolvimento Sustentável reafirmam o preceito da Rio+20, que é...
All right, well, that was the official start of the UN General Assembly, where the General Secretary of the UN, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, also delivered his opening remarks. And you've also been watching the President of the UN General Assembly also addressing the delegates. And it seems that everyone's view is that there is serious need for global action on all the challenges that are currently gripping the world. And that would, of course, be achieved if relevant members deliver well on their mandate and also within the specified time so as to root out corruption in the actual adoption of those goals. We are trying to get the English translation and we'll return for Barack Obama's speech. We'll cross back to the Assembly then. Please stay with us.